My name is Leona Binz, and I'm a protection officer at Scholars at Risk, which is an international network of over 650 higher education institutions in 43 countries that is dedicated to promoting academic freedom worldwide and supporting at-risk scholars, including by arranging temporary university positions. Through SAR's Practitioners at Risk program, we are at times also able to offer support to and arrange temporary university positions for individuals who are at risk in relation to their work promoting human rights and democracy. SAR is a proud member of the Opportunities Network for At-Risk Writers, Artists, Rights Defenders, and Scholars, or Onwards in short. This project is a group effort coordinated by Ithaca City of Asylum with support from Cornell University's Migrations Global Grant Challenge, and is in partnership with several organizations that work to support people who have been displaced to the US in continuing their important work in safety. While temporary opportunities, so the type of opportunities that many of the organizations participating in Onwards arrange, can be important in enabling at-risk individuals in relocating to a safe space and serve as a bridge to new opportunities, we also know that there are many challenges and uncertainties that come with temporary positions. And once you have arrived in a new country and are now planning for and navigating your next steps. So therefore, Onwards seeks to offer support and hopefully encouragement by providing information from experts and insights and advice from others about how they have navigated their next steps. So therefore, we've been organizing a series of workshops, and today is the 5th workshop. You can find recordings on the previous workshops on US visas, the US healthcare and health insurance system, the academic job search, and the non-academic job search online on onwardsproject.org. This will be the last time, and we'll make this announcement. Today's session will be recorded and it will be posted to the Onwards website in the coming weeks. So please feel free to leave your video on or off as you prefer, but please do mute yourself. And in case of any privacy concerns, please feel free to edit your name in the participant list. So today's session, we will talk about finding and making the most of fellowships and residencies. And the session today is structured largely in 4 parts. The first 3 parts will focus on fellowships for artists, human rights and democracy defenders, and scholars, respectively, and will be followed by a panel discussion by 3 of our speakers on how they have navigated the process of finding and applying to and making the most of fellowships. We welcome questions throughout via the Q&A function below, and we will have space for questions both after each part and at the end. And I'm delighted that we have 6 presenters today, all with unique insights and expertise. So before we begin with the first presentation, let's have a quick round of brief 30-second introductions. And Yayun, if you can please start and share your name, your affiliation, and your motivation for contributing to today's session.
Thank you, Leona. Hi, everyone. My name is Yayun. Yayun is my first name. Tan is my last name. I currently serve as a Immigrant Artist Resource Center program officer at the New York Foundation for the Arts, in short, NYFA. NYFA is an artist service organization, and that means we support artists and provide resources, hopefully, that are helpful to them at the critical stage of their career. We also support cultural workers and arts organization. Given my position, in my position, I support artists relatively new to the country to start and build their career. And for me personally, I think I feel like, I love to think about, what kind of stories are being told in art spaces, and I feel like supporting perspective, stories, that are not oftentimes being presented in those spaces is very important. And hopefully, by supporting immigrant artists, we can do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Naz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nazanin Nourouzi. I'm a visual artist based in New York City, and I've lived in the US for the past 11 years. I've been affiliated with a number of nonprofits and different organizations in New York, and I feel like it's really important to know the effect and the impact of building a community and network, which I have personally benefited a lot from, finding my space in a new country. And I'm really glad to be part of this panel today.
Yes, and I think we all look forward to hearing more about your path and advice. Xerxes, please.
Thank you, Leona. I'm Xerxes Spencer. I'm Director of Fellowships at the National Endowment for Democracy. The NED is primarily a grant-making organization. However, I work on the fellowship side of the NED, welcoming frontline defenders, activists, artists, scholars, journalists, a wide range of professionals to Washington, D.C. for 5 or so months of reflection and research and writing and outreach. And I'm looking forward to sharing more about my experience. But the most rewarding, fulfilling aspect of that work has been welcoming frontline defenders like Shahinda, whom you'll hear from in a short while, who have been persecuted in their home countries and who are forging a new path in exile. So that's my motivation to be part of this community.
Yes, thank you. And actually, let's pass it to Shahinda.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Xerxes. It's good to be here again with you. I'm Shahinda. I'm originally from the Maldives and currently living in Germany. I used to run a human rights organization, the Maldivian Democracy Network. And I'm right now in the process of registering another organization out here. Well, my motivation is that fellowships, my experience with the fellowships is it's life-changing for me. And I hope to share some of that experience with the people here today. And I would just like to mention one of the fellowships actually with the Hamburg Foundation here in Hamburg. I say it saved my life. And the second one at NED really put me back into what I love doing, gave me the confidence and knowledge and a lot of support. So I hope I can give you more information and share experiences here. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahinda. Jane.
Hi, hello to everyone. Thank you, John, Leona, all the Onwards team, and the other presenters, and all of you who are attending today. I'm Jane Unruh, and I direct the Scholars at Risk program at Harvard. We're, of course, a member of the Scholars at Risk Network, and ours is a program for at-risk and persecuted scholars, artists, and writers. We define scholar broadly to include any discipline represented in the university. And I've been doing this work for more than 15 years now, and I got involved quite accidentally. But I'm a writer, and I've taught writing in many Boston area colleges and universities, including Harvard. And I'm really happy to be here today. I love to share a bit of what I have learned in doing my job, but I'm mostly interested in learning from everybody else. Very grateful to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm very glad that you did accidentally find this path. Achiro.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Achiro Watch, and I'm an artist from Uganda. I'm currently living in New York, where I've been for a little over 2 years now. I'm currently the Weiss International Fellow and the Scholar at Risk Fellow at Barnard College. And I'm motivated to share with you my journey in terms of community, like Naz said, and also in terms of opportunity. That's why I'm here. So I hope you get one or two things that worked for me and are still working for me up to now.
Thank you, Achiro. And of course, everyone else for joining for today and contributing your insights. So I think, as you can tell, we have 6 speakers with a lot to share today. So that is why I will pass it on now to Yayun, who will start us off with more information about fellowships and residencies for artists. And Yayun, I will share my screen now to start your presentation.
Thank you, Leona. And I think it's maybe it's the weather. I've been getting a message telling me that my internet is a little bit stable. So it's even better that you're sharing the PowerPoint. I hope, Wi-Fi cooperates today. And I wanted to thank everybody to be here again. And I also want to thank John for spearheading this very important project, reaching out to NYFA's Immigrant Artist Program. Leona, thank you for moderating the conversation. And as I said in the introduction, NYFA support artists, and especially the Immigrant Artist Program. We support artists who are relatively new to the US to build your arts career here. And we do so really emphasize on building foster community. And just like Naz and Achiro had said, finding and building your community and stay in touch with your community is in some way very, very important for anybody in any career, but at the same time for someone who is relatively new there. So a lot of our program really centers on that. We also do that by sharing knowledge and resources, and that can include, let's say, some more big picture type of information, like how does one to set your arts career goals, right? How do you strategic plan for your career, right? We can also share something smaller, but equally important technical information, like, how do you build your pathways to achieve your goal? And that probably means, how do you nail a grants application? How do you build a artist statement, resume, and things like that. So for today's focus, we're going to focus on talking about residencies and fellowship opportunities in the arts field. We're going to talk about what are those opportunities and how to get them. But I think it's important for us to, before diving in, to kind of zoom out a little bit to look at the big picture. So the first slide, feel like, it's important to understand the context where we are at and, gather some information so that could be helpful for one to formulate your personal goal and career strategy, right? So something that I listed here, for example, ecology, right? Think about, right, in the US, the new maybe arts cultural ecology, right? In general, there are relatively few resources, let's say from government entities, to support an artist lifeline. So things like, basic income program, basically it's not here, non-existent. Healthcare, housing resources are hard to come by here. So that means for many people, including artists, it's really up to you to support yourself, to provide those basic needs. And that also could means, there could be more freedom for you to maybe tell your story. But again, think about what I just said, and that also means this is up to you to foster your audience, foster your community, and up to you to secure resources to fund and support your work. So I think it's important also to talk a little bit about myths, especially for someone who's relatively new here, right? We oftentimes might have an idea or an image of how working artists live their lives in the US, right? Or sometimes New York City, right? Especially the idea of a full-time artist, right? But again, think about what I just talked about. I mean, in many ways, up to you to support yourself, make the ends meet. So that means most of the artists, in fact, there's no one way to practice your arts, right? There's many different ways for one to think about how to strategize so they can keep practicing their art and sustain their practice, right? This can be a talk by itself, but some people might have a 9-to-5 job or different types of jobs in the arts field, not in the arts field. They are culture workers, some are teaching, even the most high profile artists, they are not just spending their time making, all the time. They still need to spend substantial times to, keep networking, maintain relationship with collectors, buyers, curators to get more opportunities. So with that, then it comes to strategy, right? Then there are several things that can help us to think about, okay, if I am still in the process of needing to think about how to stay here, how does that inform first maybe my goal to be an artist, wanting to continue to practice my career, my arts, right? And then how do I stay here, right? And so I would say connecting back to our focus today, residencies and fellowship, one thing I do want to know in the arts is, especially for residency opportunities, there are, in general, you can find many residencies and fellowship opportunities in the arts based in the US. And many residency opportunities welcome international artists. But many of those programs does require artists to take care of their visa arrangements to participate. So maybe the reality, or maybe the strategy is then it's not about securing those opportunities so that I get to, get the visa so I can stay here. Rather is, how does those opportunities can help me achieve my career goals and at the same time be really convincing and great materials when it comes to me trying to petition my visas to stay in the US. So then we get to our nitty-gritty, today's next slide, yeah. So today we're talking about residencies and fellowship in the arts, and I would say today in the field more and more these two type of opportunities, the line is blurred, but I think it's still important to sort of talk about their differences in general. Residencies are usually an organization grants and artists access to and dedicate time in the residencies facilities. So basically, the idea is to provide time and space for someone to create, either on specific project or just, to create. Fellowship usually comes in some way with a status. So it's usually a benefit or honor conferred on an artist by an organization for a fixed period of time. So one example is NYFA has been partnered with the New York State cultural entity. It's called the New York State Council on the Arts, short for NYSCA. So this NYFA fellowship has been going on for 40 years. And basically the fellowship is unrestricted $8,000 cash. And the goal is to support one's arts practice. We support artists in 15 different disciplines. And basically, if you get this fellowship, you can spend the award any way you want, for your rent, for your studio, for your vacation. But in many ways, this comes with some type of status, given that this is a very competitive award fellowships. And at the same time, the panels are formed by professionals working in that field, in that discipline. But at the same time, there's many higher education, as Leona and other fellow presenters said, there are many fellowship positions welcome artists to join in higher education institution. And that type of opportunity oftentimes is also being called fellowship as well. So we're going to next slide, going a little bit deeper. What does an artist residency usually provide? And in general, it's a place for someone to focus on the creation of work. So you might be able to find time and space to create. Some residencies, happen in a very remote rural area, right? So you might need to relocate to that area to participate in the program. Some take place in a big city, and the goal might be providing artists studio space. Some periods are shorter, only a few weeks. Some last for a year or more, but those are less. And I think one thing that's important when you're looking to this type of opportunity is some residencies comes with a lot of benefits. Sometimes they even provide stipend, right, or provide meals when you're on site. But some does require a fee, or sometimes they call tuition to participate. So definitely read closely when you're looking at the program information, what's being offered. Many opportunities like this expect artists to engage with their communities, and that could mean engage with your fellow artist cohort. It could be from the same discipline or different discipline, build a community, maybe to exchange idea. Sometimes could mean the organization already have an audience, public audience, so they might ask you to do some type of public engagement, maybe give a talk or present your work or lead a workshop, things like that. Next slide. When it comes to fellowship, usually, as we said, it's a sort of a status benefit, honor conferred onto an artist. So usually comes with some kind of financial benefit. It could be a cash award. It could be a set of service with a, cash value. These opportunities can include access to facilities, and because, the program usually wanted to announce who are the fellows, right? So it comes with maybe some promotional considerations. There might some actions they require to take, there might be not. It's just totally, an award, unrestricted, cash award maybe. And I would say a big differences from residency program is fellowship often supports an artist practice rather than a specific project. Next slide, thank you. Then, why? Why do we want to try to get opportunities like this? So, I mean, in general, as I said before, there's two types of opportunities. Sometimes, the line, between them is more and more blur. It really depending on who is structuring this type of program. But in general, opportunities like this are really good for an artist because you might get time and space to create and research. You will get opportunity to share your work, either is with public or with your people in the same field. Some programs they would design so that perhaps presenter or curators will have regular visit. Then you might get to meet arts professionals outside of that immediate organization. The great part is, again, community. You get to connect with people in the field. Other benefits can include, again, similar to opportunity to share your work, then you will get some feedback, right? And sometimes some programs really pay attention to design so that you get to hear back from, let's say, a curator working in the field, and that would be helpful. Some residency opportunities maybe ask you to complete a project at the end of the opportunities. Some really don't, expect that. It's a place for you to try things out, right? So a place for you to try new things. That's great too. You might get to meet other people, maybe in the same discipline, maybe not, but there might be opportunity for you to keep working with those fellow artists. And many opportunity like this, you get access to resources, especially residency opportunity. They might have a kiln, so you can fire your ceramic work, right? Access to woodworking facilities. So next slide, thank you. So we know about this type of opportunity, then the question is, okay, how do we apply, right? So in the next two slides, I'm going to talk about a general process and some of the common material that's needed. And so as you can see, common process, usually opportunities like this will have an open call, and usually informations are being published on their website. So in the open call, you can, learn about what the opportunity is, the goal of the program or the organization, who supports this opportunities, eligibility, whether it's maybe designed for residents in California, based in California, right? And what's the requirement for residency, right? It could, you will learn about program structure, how long does it take, what type of activity is being designed, benefit that comes with the opportunities, right? And then you will learn about what type of material is needed for application form and deadline, right? And then, there's a panel review, and then there's a notification process. Some opportunities might require an interview. It really depends. You will learn that from their program descriptions. And then it's, your time to participate in an opportunity. And then during the time of your stay, fulfillment and engagement, let's say, engage with the public or something. But the program doesn't just end, right? As we talked about community, I think very important to remember is after the program finished, you still, wanted to maintain your relationship with either people you met in your cohort or with the organizations or people you met, maybe new audience that you developed, right? So those are something that you can keep thinking about. And then when it comes to next slide, common materials needed, I'm also just going to go through it very quickly because I think, it's more high level information that we wanted to provide today. So audit statement basically is text statement for an opportunity for you to tell panel, as an artist, who are you? Provide some very clear description so people can picture almost your work. And then it comes to your work sample, past work to in some way support what you just said in your artist statement, right? And then artist file provides more details in terms of, okay, what were some of your past engagements, some of the community you're already part of. So there's 3 components really, give, you're trying to give the panelists a sense of who you are as an artist. And then depending on the opportunity, let's say residency, right? For the most part, they would want to know, what do you want to accomplish here, right? So why this opportunity? What is your goal? And in many applications, because they would need to get back to you, for the decisions results. So you would have to put in your personal information. Very important that the email that you provide is the email inbox that you check. And more often applications like this would ask for demographic information, such as maybe your racial, ethnic identity, gender identity, household income, and something like that. The purpose is for the organization to understand who is participating and engaging their program, but most of the time, there should be an option so that you can say, prefer not to disclose if you have any privacy concern. Sometimes opportunities might ask you to provide funding plan. And I would say in this case, it's when residency opportunities ask you to provide fee or tuition to participate. Okay, so rather than getting into the nitty-gritty, how do I perfect my resume and things like that, I would invite us to think about some big themes when we are applying for opportunities like this. First, think about who is providing the opportunity. Why are they interested in providing opportunity like this? What's their goal, right? And then at the same time, think about whether that aligns with your career goal, your arts practice, right? It's really important to read the guideline and ask, am I eligible, right? Because sometimes, the opportunity might design for emerging artists, but by their definition, usually the opportunity will also define what emerging artists is for them. You might not fall into that category, right? But the idea is you need to understand the mission of the program and the opportunity and what you're applying for. And then the next slide is keep thinking from your own end, what your goal is. Why do you need the opportunity at this time? There are so many opportunities around. Why this, but not the others, right? Many times we tell artists is, if you determine this doesn't align with your career goal, then, don't even spend your time and energy to put together an application, because it does take time, right? What is your goal? Why this is a good fit? And then think about how you can make contributions to the goal of the opportunity for the program. So basically the next slide is a visual. Hopefully it can help us understand, the alignment is really important. Your goal and the program goal, I would say, really needs to align in order for it to be a meaningful experience for you, and to also make sense for the organizations to invite you to their community. Okay, so next slide. So overall, right, what to consider when preparing the materials, and those little things in the yellow circle are the materials that are commonly required by these opportunities. So I think today, I think I'm going to emphasize on all these materials should work together as a cohesive story, and your application should tell your story, who you are, why do you want to participate in the opportunity, and what do you hope to accomplish through this experience. Okay, so yeah, the next few slides are, I think, resources for you to keep doing your own research, and hope this will be like a good start in some way for you, where to find opportunities like this. So the next few slides is, I think it's very clear. Yeah, and the residencies that I listed there, they are all open for international artists and for multiple different disciplines, except for the one that I noted not. So it's for you to hopefully, keep digging in, and feel free to keep in touch with us or other organizations to help you build your arts career.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I see you have 2 announcements here. I think those are probably 2 workshops.
Yeah, that's related to what we talked about. So other than, we also, NIFA also organize like public programs. So if you want to learn about how to nail the application, there's an opportunity, and also creating digital content. So also for everyone's reference here. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Yayun. We will share these materials afterwards. So you will have the resources lists and the announcements for the other 2 workshops. But I think there was a lot of information, general information about how to apply for fellowships and residencies that will also apply to the next sessions. But we would also like to hear from Nazanin about your experience. I know that you've held a number of fellowships, and so if you can speak about your path and any advice that you would like to pass on to others.
Sure, yes. Thank you so much, Yayun. I think you covered almost everything that I wanted to talk about. I think it's really, really informative. For me, it was like, I'm originally from Iran, and I came to the US as a grad student to go to Pratt. So coming from a very, very different art system, it took me a while to get used to how things operate here. First of all, community was always important to me. When you are living in a country such as Iran, when there's not any freedom of speech for artists, you get very close to the community that you have. And I had learned to trust them and for us to work together. So that was something that I think that was that kind of an experience that I could translate when I came here. And realize that it is as important here also in a free world, but it might like operate a little differently. So it took me a couple of, I think, years to understand what is an artist residency, what is a fellowship, all the differences that Yayun was talking about, and of course the myth of working artist, which I think it's extremely, extremely important to know and pay attention to. I remember the first day that I went to grad school, our dean said that just remember, every artist needs a day job. And I think I was a little offended at first. I was like, oh my God, I came to New York all the way for someone to tell me that I need to have a job and not being able to go to the studio, you know, every day. But the more your art career and your practice develop, the more you realize that an artist is not just their studio practice. There's a lot of other things that you have to do, you know, your online presence, your community, as you mentioned, talking to fellow artists, working with curators, going to seeing the shows. And depending on where you live, all of these things can be different. So the few things that I just wanted to mention when applying for residencies and fellowships, of course, some of them come in a different format. For some, you get nominated. For most of them, you need to apply for. Is the constant, and I know it's a really big issue for a lot of visual artists, is the rejections that you get constantly. And it's part of the process as well. It can be hard, it can be heartbreaking, it can be very frustrating, but it is part of the process. So just know that, you know, if you get rejected for an opportunity, it doesn't necessarily mean that your work is not good. It depends on so many different things. It depends on how you wrote your statement, what was on the, you know, who was on the cohort, who else applied. The jury panels usually change every year. So if you don't get an opportunity, make sure to apply again if it's the right place for you or if it's the right opportunity for you. I was a NIFA immigrant cohort in 2018, which helped me a lot. I was kind of fresh out of a few years after I was out of the grad school. And it really helped me to build another community. Some of the people that I met there, we became friends. We applied for shows together. We applied for opportunities. So it's like, it's important to solidify these kind of relationships or these, you know, the connections that you make. Or for the NIFA fellowship that you mentioned, which I received, and it's something that you apply for. I actually applied for it 3 times for 3 different disciplines. And finally, the 3rd year, you know, I got it. So these are all the things to like kind of consider when you're, you know, trying to navigate your career here. And then when you're applying for, you know, when I personally, when I apply for fellowships or residencies, because I'm a printmaker or I work with archives and photographs all the time, as you mentioned, I always pay attention to what kind of facilities they have. I like to go somewhere that I can use a print shop, like a printmaking workshop or a dark room, or, you know, so it kind of limits me or not. I'm very selective about the places that I apply for. Of course, you know, money is always an issue. Financial situation is an issue. So make sure to pay attention if you have to pay tuition for these residencies or not. Personally, I prefer to participate in the ones that they offer some kind of a you know, stipend. But depending on like what your project is, it might be worth investing in it. And I know that we talked about, I talked about, you know, the importance of community and building a network, but I think when it comes to visual arts, it's extremely important to stay in touch with your fellow artists. You know, I always try to have studio visit exchange with other artists, you know, go to their studios, they come back to my studio, we go back and forth, we work on projects together. Your online presence is really important as an artist. A lot of people think that, oh, online presence only means like, you know, social media these days, which is, yes, important, but, you know, I can also emphasize enough on having a good website, documenting your work well, good photographs for residencies and applications is really important to have good pictures of your work with good quality. It doesn't have to necessarily be professionally, you know, photographed. I know that also costs a lot of money, but, you know, have a good camera, or like a lot of cell phones these days do a good job. So make sure that, you know, you document your work really well. And especially if your work is like politically conscious or, you know, kind of like engaged with the community or a group of people, it's important for everyone to like work together, you know, like you can do, there are so many things that artists can do to put themselves out there, you know, work on like publications, zines, blogs, I don't know, interviews, all these things that kind of make you known or like put your work out there. And then I guess I just have one more thing that I want to add, which is something that I'm still learning. And, you know, as a visual artist, writing is very hard for me. I don't like writing statements. I don't like writing grants, but I'm learning it. But it's really helpful to know that when you're writing an artist statement, you are presenting yourself in a paragraph. So try to, for lack of a better word, try to avoid like jargon words that is like too complex. Always think about 4 or 5 different keywords that are integral to your practice. The things that if you want to like, you know, say your work, what is your work about? Those 5 things come to mind. It can be technical things, you know, if it's really important that you work with oil, for example, and not acrylics, or if it's really important that you work with 35mm photographs, that can be that too. But oftentimes those 5 words are contextual. They're about the context of your work. So have like 4 or 5 different keywords and then incorporate them into your artist statement. It really, really helps. Think about like, people are not going to have a lot of time going through these applications. I've been on both sides of, you know, being an applicant and being on a jury panel. And it really helps when you're on the other side to know that there's really not much time. There's a lot of, you know, applications. You're looking at a lot of pictures and the work needs to stand out. And when it goes to the second round and you're reading the statement, if it's complex or confusing, you can't really follow what the artist is talking about. So just try to make it clear, but do incorporate those kind of like 4 or 5 keywords that really represent your work.
Thank you, Nazanin. And Yayun also just shared, I think, a good article on 5 do's and don'ts. Thank you very much for your advice, Nazanin. I think, right, to summarize, online presence, which maybe later you can share more about, keywords. And I think the advice of thinking about when you are preparing your application materials, think about being on the other side. If you're the reviewer, you are reviewing, that can be 10, 20, 100 applications. What would make that application stand out to you? And of course, finding community. And I know that that is something that Xerxes and Shahinda will also touch on in our next part, which is about fellowships for human rights and democracy defenders. And I should say, if you have any questions now or later, please feel free to raise them in the Q&A function of the chat. And then we will have time for questions later. But thank you very much, Yayun and Nazanin, and Xerxes, please.
Thank you so much, Leona. I appreciate the opportunity to share my own perspectives, which will resonate and echo and mirror much of what Yayun and Nazanin have shared. These are my own views based on a number of years working as the Director of Fellowships at the National Endowment for Democracy in Washington, D.C. This is just an overview of what I hope to cover, a little bit about what a fellowship is, which Yayun has already touched upon, what would make a strong fellowship application, and then I'll delve into what can a fellowship really mean for you. In so many ways, it's a bridge towards full-time pursuit of your professional preoccupation, whatever that may be. So I'll talk about a fellowship as a bridge towards your next step and to your pursuit of your career. As Yayun and Nazin have said, it's certainly an opportunity to develop a sense of community and solidarity. It's an adventure, international exchange. I'll talk about that. It's a chance to gain skills and build capacity, of course, to focus on something creative, something tangible. Is it a work of art? Is it a piece of writing? Is it something else? And might it spark a new idea, a new initiative? And that will be a great segue to Shahinda. So that's my overview. Just to dispel any misconceptions, we're not talking about fellowships today as money to defray costs of higher education. This, in our context, is a funded opportunity to do your work based at a host institution. So I think this should be clear to people. It's maybe a few months in duration, maybe a year or longer in duration, that can vary. But hopefully it will be that bridge towards something full-time in the next phase of your career. As you apply for fellowships, tell your story. This is something that Yayun talked about. What drew you to your profession, whether you're an artist, whether you are a human rights defender, whether you are a political scientist, a lawyer, a journalist. If you're not passionate about your profession, how can you expect the programs and universities and institutions to which you're applying to be passionate about you? So you want to convey that passion in your application. Share your story. What has led you to this turning point in your life? What challenges have you faced? Of course, this webinar and this series is about writers, artists, people at risk. So we want to hear about the challenges that you have faced that have brought you to this point in your life, that you're applying for a fellowship. What do you hope to gain from the fellowship? Not just in terms of something tangible by way of a fellowship product, a piece of writing, a piece of art, something else, but how will it help to position you for the next phase in your career? References, strong recommendation letters. It is so often the case that references feel the need to simply state that Shahinda is intelligent and smart and accomplished and dedicated to her field of human rights activism. Yes, she is, but just don't utter those platitudes. Tell us how she is accomplished. How is she dedicated? How has she reached the highest levels of achievement in her field? It's because she has founded an organization, or she has mobilized tens of thousands of individuals, or she has published, spell out in specific terms what makes the individual exceptional. Develop a plan of action when you arrive for your fellowship. What do you hope to get out of it? Do you have an agenda, a set of objectives, a set of goals? What are those goals? You may have set forth a set of goals in your application. That may be something you remain faithful to, or from the time you applied to the time you arrive, you might have had a shift in thinking. There may have been some political developments in your home country that have made you rethink your perspective and your approach. Sit down with your mentor, your faculty advisor, your colleagues at your fellowship program to develop a meaningful, tangible, feasible, realistic plan of action. What will that be? Will you write something? Will you paint something? Will you compose a piece of music? Will you convene a series of discussions, a major workshop or a presentation or more? What will that plan of action be? And not only will that be an end unto itself, but it will be a stepping stone to that next step. Think about the future. Where will I go at the end of that semester, at the end of that year, at the end of the fellowship? How can I, with the steps I'm taking now, with my fellowship projects, activities, endeavors, position myself to that next phase in my life? I couldn't underscore more the points that Yayun and Nazneen have mentioned about the fellowship being a source of community, a source of professional and personal solidarity. Knowing that frontline defenders, artists, scholars, journalists in this community have fled persecution. You've been attacked, targeted, intimidated, harassed, persecuted for your human rights work, for your artistic work, for your scholarly work. And so you have come to this point in your life. Embrace it as a reprieve, as a cooling off period. And hopefully your faculty mentors, your program advisors would likewise see the fellowship as not just a platform to churn out results in terms of products, but as a cooling off period, as a chance to connect with counterparts who have likewise been targeted, who are finding themselves likewise in exile. a chance to recharge your batteries, a chance to focus on your personal self. That emotional care, that psychosocial well-being is fundamental to a fellowship experience. Certainly, that's how we have approached our fellowships at the National Endowment for Democracy. Connecting with your fellow fellows is incredibly important, because whether somebody is from Burma or the Maldives or Pakistan or Nigeria or Guatemala or Russia or China, you may come from different linguistic, cultural, political backgrounds, but you have so much more in common than what might divide you from one another. You are all colleagues in this shared cause of expressing yourself, this shared cause for freedom of expression, freedom of assembly in your countries and across the globe. And so that sense of community is paramount. Your program advisors can help to foster that. You can help to foster that. You can take the initiative. And through that, it will be a source of personal rejuvenation and professional renewal. See it also as an adventure. It's an adventure international exchange. Our program and many other fellowship programs are J1 programs. By definition, the United States defines the J1 program as an international educational and cultural exchange program. What does that mean? That basically means that you are here to share your own insights, your own experiences with the community that you're now a part of, sharing with and learning from. So it is by definition an exchange of ideas, of stories, of best practices, of lessons. As part of that adventure in international exchange, of course, the first step is get to know your host institution. Get to know the leadership of the institution, the leadership of the program that has welcomed you. Who are the directors, the staff? What are their roles? Is there a career services center at your institution? Is there a public affairs and communications department at your institution? There may be staff who are helping to set up meetings on your behalf, which is wonderful. And if not, take the initiative yourself to request meetings from the head of your department, the head of your center, the head of your program, the head of your institution. If there are events being convened by your program center, department, institution, sign up for them. Immerse yourself in the rich educational, intellectual life of your institution. And as a stepping stone to that, get to know the wider professional community. Whether you're at a university, a foundation, a nonprofit, a think tank, a research institute, or otherwise, immerse yourself in the wider professional community of affiliated institutions beyond just the host program that has welcomed you. Take the initiative to reach out to counterparts and colleagues, experts in your field, who can not only shed light on your topic, who can help to widen and broaden your horizons on the topic that you are focusing on as a fellow, but who could also in their own way help to connect you with other colleagues, other experts who may end up loving you, embracing you, and offering you a position, so that networking and the conducting of outreach is twofold in its purpose. It helps to shed light on your topic, but it also might help you get your next fellowship or your next place in your career. Elevator pitch. People may or may not know what an elevator pitch is. It basically means that if you're with an important person in your field, in the elevator going from the 11th floor to the first floor, in the few seconds it takes to go from floor 11 to lobby level, are you able to succinctly describe your focus, your interest, and how that individual might help you with that particular focus? That is the elevator pitch. Follow up at the end of that meeting, whether it's in person or a virtual meeting, follow up to thank the individual for their time, and then invite them to connect you with others in their field. Fellowships are also a chance to build capacity, gain skills. Find out from your host institution, are there workshops, are there seminars, are there trainings that the institution are offering for free? Are there courses that you can enroll in, audit, take credit for? Or are there other workshops, other seminars, other capacity building resources language learning that the institution does not offer, but may be willing to cover the cost of. It never hurts to take the initiative and to ask. And then as you immerse yourself in this adventured international exchange, as you build your capacity, as you gain new skills, of course, with that exchange, with that capacity, you're able to put your thoughts down on paper, produce something creative, compose a piece of music or a beautiful work of art, plan and plot for that next phase of your life with the resources that your institution has to offer. Can they offer you an office? Is it an in-person office yourself? Is it a shared office? Is there a library that you can tap into? Is there a studio? Are there interns or research associates who can help you with your work? If you want to publish your work, is there in-house publication or other publications that mentors and advisors at your institution can point you to? And will there be opportunities for you to showcase your work, whether it is simply an event or an exhibition or what have you? And then finally, building upon all your prior experience, all the lessons you have gained over many years of working in the field and many months at the fellowship program, you might ask yourself, how can I consolidate, aggregate all that I have learned and position myself to the next phase of my life? That too is a meaningful part of a fellowship experience. It is a bridge to the next phase of your career, or it could invite you to take a new direction in your career. Does it spark a new idea for a new initiative that you want to spearhead, that you want to pioneer? A new path forward that would be meaningful to you, meaningful to your community. And this is something that I think Shahinda will talk about in her remarks. So finally, in conclusion, key to a successful fellowship is immersing yourself in a nurturing community. You are part of that community. You have so much to offer that community, and fellow fellows, colleagues, counterparts, mentors, alumni are all a part of that community. To the extent there are events, participate in them so that you deepen your understanding of that wider cause that you're a part of. Infrastructure of support services are, of course, fundamental to that experience, and we would hope that the host institution can provide you with what you need, digital and other forms of resources to carry on your work. And then finally, in conclusion, fellowships really are a lifeline. I have seen this from my direct experience with so many frontline defenders at risk forging new paths forward in exile. Fellowships are a lifeline to embattled activists, scholars, journalists, artists, and others who are making their way forward in a new homeland. They can inspire personal rejuvenation and professional renewal. You will find community and solidarity through that fellowship program, and they will ideally build building blocks for you to get back on your feet and back on the front lines of carrying on your incredibly important work on the front lines of freedom around the world. So with that, I will turn it back over to Leona. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Xerxes, especially for all the, I think, advice, very practical advice. So some of what I'll highlight for networking, Xerxes mentioned the elevator pitch. If you aren't familiar, well, maybe I can find a link during the next presentation, but I would encourage everyone to try it out, to formulate an elevator pitch for yourself for your next networking opportunities. The other thing you highlighted, Xerxes, is to show passion and to, in any application materials, convey why you are passionate about what you are doing. And I think both Xerxes and Yayun raised questions beforehand to ask yourself while you are looking for fellowships and while you're applying for fellowships. So what is your motivation for this particular fellowship? Are you seeking to continue the work you've been doing? Or, as Xerxes mentioned, are you also seeking to pivot? And I think the answers to these questions are what will also make for a strong application. And I think Xerxes shared a lot of good advice on how to prep your references so that they can hopefully share informative and of course very enthusiastic letters of reference for you. So thank you very much, Xerxes. And Shahinda, we would love to hear from you about your experience, of course, in human rights and democracy fellowships, and any advice and thoughts that you have for others.
Thank you. I will probably be repeating some of what Xerxes said. But, well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. Well, I will start off by saying that applying for and traveling to participate in fellowships as someone who has been forced into exile or leave home is it's challenging. So bearing in mind that this is the context that a lot of us actually apply and go for fellowships in, it's just, I'm sure many of us here understand the situation. It's just like you are many times completely cut off from the movement or from your community and the work that you have been doing. So my experience with the fellowships have been that it really lifts you up and it gives you so many opportunities to continue and get back into the work that you have left. Two very different things that I have experienced. One is that some fellowships, like the Reagan Fassel fellowship that I was most recently with Xerxes, is very structured and guides you through a lot of learning and exchange, and at the same time it provides you with a lot of time and really good space physically and mentally to work in. The other kind of experience I've had is it's not structured and it doesn't really require any kind of project from the side of the applicant. It's just like a respite program. But there's a lot of public exposure, a lot of events and networking, which is both really very useful for someone who has been cut off from your work, right? So it depends on what kind of program you're looking for. Sometimes you may not be in the right mental space to go for a structured and kind of project-based fellowship. You really might be needing some just time to rest, but at the same time not really getting fully disconnected from what you've been doing. It worked for me, but both types of fellowships really worked for me. But I will be talking mostly about my most recent fellowship with the Reagan Fassel program, and to highlight some of the really beneficial experiences I had there. One, I will start with what everyone else has also commented or shared, the sense of community. Like Xerxes said, our fellows is a really, really important part of the fellowship. Connecting with them, spending time with them, and learning and sharing with one another is a really, really interesting and really productive part of the fellowship, I would say. And beyond the fellows, the team at NED, not just the Reagan Fassel team, but the team at NED has been, for me, such a great source of support and solidarity, as well as knowledge. There's so much knowledge to get there. It's just, for me, it was one of the most immersive experiences I've had in my professional life. It's just so much to learn, and I really appreciated it. and Xerxes being such a great support. Thank you, Xerxes, again. It really meant a lot. We got to work on an exiles project, and it was really amazing. It's really helpful to have a director who is really invested in the work that you are doing and ready to offer you guidance. It's really great.
Do you want to share a little bit about that Exile initiative that came to you during your fellowship time, Shahinda, briefly?
I will. So I was coming to that next. I came to the fellowship with a planned project to write a book about our experiences with violent extremism in the Maldives, which also I was really able to work on, and I'm still working on. But then after I arrived in DC and started my fellowship, we developed this initiative that would provide long-term support for activists in exile, which, as I was saying, it was really a pleasure to work with Xerxes on. The project identified gaps in support between temporary programs and beyond that. And we were able to get information from people in exile and organizations and programs that offered different kinds of support, and then tap into the gaps where little or no support existed. I'm still waiting on some responses to finally kick off the organization. And that is really the biggest success I had at the Reagan for Sale program. Apart from that, I mean, the sense of, for example, the kind of support that really meant a lot for me was the library. Like Xerxes was just mentioning, I'm still able to use the library for my research and for my studies as well. It really helped. And what was it? Yeah, moving on to some advice to people who might be interested in applying. What I think worked for me was I put a lot of thought into the project, to the point that I actually planned the chapters and what would go into different chapters and how much time I would spend on each chapter, and so on and so forth. So I think really planning and kind of visualizing what you want out of the program is really, really important. And the more you think about it, the better you are able to express those thoughts in the application. And the second thing is, however much you plan and envision your project, be open to change. I went in with a whole planned book in my head, and then we changed the project into something completely new. So be open that, you know, something really great might come out of the project after you begin the fellowship. And the third thing is make time to stay healthy. It really, really meant a lot to me that at the Reagan for Sale Fellowship, we had access to a gym in the office building, which really worked for us, and a few of us went there regularly. And it really made a difference, because before the fellowship, I was actually just so consumed by the integration process here in Germany. I really was just sitting in front of a computer for 2 whole years, which made me really unhealthy. And then through the program in DC, I was able to shift back into a really healthy work-life balance and, you know, making time for myself. I think it's really, really important that you do that at the fellowships.
Yeah.
So That
Yes.
I've stopped. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you, Shahinda. Well, I think one important thing, among others, that you touched on is that, of course, many of you, most of you, if not all of you, come to your current fellowships or your next fellowships under difficult circumstances. And so, of course, we're talking a lot about how do you craft the best application, present yourself in the best way. But of course, we recognize that for many of you, this happens under difficult circumstances. And so it's really helpful that you also shared more about how you, for example, at NET, found the opportunity to stay healthy and how it lifted your spirit. And so I was going to announce it in the end, but I think right now is a good moment to share that on February 15, the next Onward session will be exactly about this topic on maintaining your mental and emotional health, because we all recognize that being in a situation of uncertainty causes a lot of stress and challenges. And so perhaps later, Nas, Achiro, and you, Shahinda, can also share more about some strategies that you found to overcome these challenges. But it's also really great to hear, Shahinda, about your book forthcoming. So we look forward to that, and about the organization you're working on, which actually connects pretty well, I think, to a question we have in the chat and that we will address later, because I know that Jane also has to go at some point. So thank you very much, Shahinda and Xerxes. And I will turn it over to Jane to talk more about her perspective on fellowships for scholars.
Thank you so much. I do have to go at 2:50, so I apologize for that, but it's just before the end. I'm so glad that Leona mentioned the fact that applications are often made under great stress and in the midst of challenges and difficulties. And I'm going to talk in a very technical way, actually, about applications and their component parts. And I'm hoping that my speaking in this way will maybe, although perhaps a bit dry, make it easier to prepare applications, maybe dispelling some myths and clarifying some things, maybe answering a few questions. I'll be talking about the Scholars at Risk program at Harvard, which I direct, but much of what I'll say can apply to other programs too. And I have no slides, so please imagine the most beautiful slides that are accompanying my talk. Here's some, for us, an application comprises these parts: a CV, a statement of risk, a statement of purpose, which is also a work proposal, and letters. This is pretty typical for fellowship applications. If there are supplemental documents that you have that include maybe work samples or evidence of risk, if those would be helpful and educated the committee about you and your work, then you would want to include those. So here are some general tips about applications based on what I've learned over the many years I've been doing this work. It's important to read the materials about the program, eligibility and requirements. If there's a frequently asked questions page, that's the result of a lot of experience. So read the materials very carefully. We accept applications and nominations from anyone. And that might be unusual for a university program, but ours is pretty old, and this development has happened over time. So you want to know about that. How does one apply for this? Does one have to be nominated? Can you just apply on your own? If a program only accepts nominations, and I know that's true of some programs, I know that's true of Yale, for example, then try to find a nominator by writing directly or through another contact who can provide a meaningful letter in your behalf. For us, a nomination is welcome, it's helpful, but it doesn't mean that your application will be taken more seriously or read more carefully than the application of someone who applies on her own behalf. So not everyone is connected to others in the same ways. Not everyone's level of security is such that they can do that kind of outreach. And there are other reasons that finding a nominator might not be possible, and we recognize that. Think about what type of fellowship or position it is. For that position, what's most important? For us, it's risk and work. And of course, eligibility. For any program, check the guidelines for eligibility very carefully. If you're not eligible or think you're not eligible, you might write to the program though, and see if you can get some suggestions or advice. A program like ours, because it exists, whether or not you are going to be a formal part of it, is an opportunity to engage with people who care, are already invested. So just because you might not be eligible doesn't mean that the program cannot somehow be useful to you, even with a suggestion. So I guess part of what's at the bottom, the base of what I'm saying today in all of these tips is to be resourceful. I think it's empowering to become more and more resourceful in this work. And so these are just some suggestions for how that also can be happening. If a program, when you apply, suggests that you make additional applications to other programs and suggests where, take this seriously. By having received your application, the program knows you're at risk and will likely want to see you creating more possibilities for yourself. No program can accept everyone, and more options is a good thing. Also, again, you never know what making an application or asking a question can lead to. This is important. It's not necessarily a sign that someone thinks your application is not likely to advance if someone suggests that you look for more opportunities and keep working in that way, difficult though it may be. So here's some suggestions about risk statements. You're likely to have to provide something like this, and we call this a risk statement in my program. So we receive a high number of applications, all from persons who are at risk. For our program, a detailed, authentic explanation and substantiation of risk is what we're looking for. We know that risk comes in many forms and in many levels of concreteness. And I would wager that that's true for any program like ours. So authenticity and specificity are important, even if the nature of the risk is less concrete. Tell it like it is. Here's a suggestion. You might want to imagine that because there are many applications being read, the statement of risk will be looked at for its core elements, for the purpose of understanding the case and discussing the case in deliberations. So when reading yours to yourself, you might ask yourself what those core elements are. How might someone who has read your risk statement think about it when reflecting upon it? How might someone who's read your risk statement discuss it with others in deliberations? Here's some suggestions for statements of purpose or work proposals or project proposals. I think this is a really important part of a fellowship application, and we've already heard so many good tips from, most recently from Xerxes about this. And Xerxes and I are working in two different kinds of institutions, and so I'm hoping that you'll hear what I'm saying in relation to what he said, and also Yayon as kind of complementary sets of advice, because we're all looking in a way at different kinds of institutions, but there's definitely overlap. So a project proposal should show why placement, in my case, in a university makes sense. A project proposal might already involve people in the university. You might be working with someone or have published with someone. Perhaps you've worked with someone in the past. In that case, it will be easy to understand why a university placement would be productive for you and for others. That does not mean, however, that your application would be successful. Not necessarily. If you don't have that kind of history, for our program, that's fine. No one is expected to form those connections for the purpose of applying for our fellowship. For writing your project proposal, think about what project or projects you would genuinely like to undertake. Is it working on a book? Would you like to teach if possible? Is it an article? Is it conducting research on your own? Through your work proposal, you're talking directly about your work. I would like to keep working on my novel. But you're also showing the level of engagement that you might wish to attain. I would like to keep working on my novel is different from I would like to keep working on my novel and I would like to engage with other members of the writing community, the human rights community. So how you talk about work also tells a secondary story. It gives people a chance to imagine how you might exist in the university, how you might operate in the university, how you might interact with others or not. I don't think you should assume that a program is looking for a particular kind of presence necessarily. We have fellows who work very privately and individually, and that could have to do with a wide range of factors, including their sense of security or just the way they work. And then we have fellows who are very engaged in the community in myriad ways. So I think being very straightforward and authentic about what you want to do is the best way to proceed with making a work proposal, not thinking too much about what you think other people are looking for. I think when you do that too much, you stray from yourself a little bit, and you're not really being yourself in ways that will lead to, I think, a better chance at achieving the outcome you're looking for. If a program is not for students, then writing about taking classes or getting a degree would not make a useful project proposal. So this goes back to learning about the program. We look at statements of purpose and work proposals in relation to other aspects of the elements of the application, and we think about potential hosts for you. Departments, centers, and institutes inside the university. So we also think about possible connections. Who would be interested in meeting this person? Conversely, who would this remarkable person be interested in meeting? So if you go too far in stating whom you want to work with and where you would want to be hosted, if those aren't possible, then you might give that secondary impression that your hosting maybe wouldn't be that successful. So I think it can be great to show that you've done your homework about the institution, maybe to make some suggestions, but don't come across as too locked in to that vision of the fellowship, so that people can do their job of imagining and helping you to make the right connections. You want people to understand what you do, what you've done, what you could do, what would you be passionate about doing, to quote Xerxes, and who you are. Quick suggestion about letters of reference. They are very important. You want to seek authentic, detailed letters of recommendation, as Xerxes has said, from persons who know you and or your work and or the nature of your risk well. How do they know you and or your work? What do they know about the nature of your risk? Maybe they don't know you well, but they know a good deal about the nature of your risk. Every letter writer does not have to know everything. Think of the letters as pieces of a whole. They fit together to provide a detailed picture of you, your work, and the risk that unfortunately you've been living with or could be living with. So very quickly, the other topic, not really about applications, but an answer to a question that I was asked to address. Have I seen fellows in our program, scholars, writers, artists, human rights defenders, medical and legal professionals, public intellectuals, succeed in taking advantage of university fellowships, making the most of that year or those 10 months? Yes, in many ways, of course, I have seen that. As I said, some working on their own and some very involved in the life of the university, some involved to a more moderate degree. So some of our fellows have not earned university degrees when they enter our program. Some have earned more than one. There are different pathways into the program, and there are different pathways into the future after the program. I think simultaneously along two different timelines when I think about a fellowship. I think about during the fellowship, and I think about after the fellowship. I start thinking about after right away, and I think about it the whole time along with during. During is what makes that fellowship period a positive experience for the fellow and the university. What's happening during that fellowship period? And after is how will what happens during the fellowship period help the fellow to move on to the next position in the best possible way? So these are two realities that are happening at the same time, and it's not easy for a fellow to have to deal with all of this. Time is short. The journey to get here has been hard. People are recovering. People have families to take care of, or they have people at home whom from afar they're trying to take care of. So it's easier to think about the during part for many people than it is to think about the after part. The after part is not only an unknown, but it's stressful to have to think about it. But thinking about the after part can help us to think about how to make the during part more productive, more meaningful, more affirming, and even transformational. So one important goal for the during that leads to the after is to be able to leave the university with strong letters of recommendation. So we loop back to this idea of letters, but these are the letters with which you move on to the next phase of your journey. So thinking about this, knowing what you know about what makes a strong letter, for persons in the university to be able to write about you, what would you like for them to be able to say when you are ready to move on? And how can you make that possible? And perhaps more importantly, looking back on your time in the university, what would you like to be able to say about that time, professionally and personally, and how can you make that possible? So to make the kinds of connections that lead to letters, which are more than just letters, as we all know, if you think about them in this way, they represent so much more. You might ask yourself two questions. One, where will I need assistance and support from others in making connections? At Harvard, it is difficult to make connections. It's huge, people are very busy, and it's hard. So where will I need that help? And where can I get it? And the other question is, what is the best way for me to make connections on my own? You can do a lot on your own. To answer these and to think about how to make connections, to whom and why, it can be very good to keep an open line of conversation going with whomever you are working with in the program, and if you have one in your host department or center or institute, and with other visiting scholars, artists, writers from around the world whom you happen to meet, so that you can make the most of your time soon after arrival, really, in beginning to connect in all kinds of different ways, personally and professionally, so that you can make that year or those 10 months as productive during the fellowship and as 10 months or a year that will have been productive when it comes to being able to move on in the best possible way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane, for all the helpful advice. A few things I'll highlight from what you said is, if you're thinking about applying for a program and have any questions about your eligibility, reach out. I think one advice from a few weeks ago from one of our previous workshops was, don't hesitate to reach out to people, even if you might not hear back. Especially when it comes to program eligibility, you likely will hear back. So do ask. The other thing is, I think sometimes when you're working on an application, some things can seem self-evident, such as I'm looking for community, or I'm looking for solidarity or to make networks, etc. But sometimes these things, depending on the type of fellowship you're applying for, are good to put in your application, if that is the type of fellowship that might offer these opportunities. To also demonstrate what you're looking for, right? As Jane said, not just I want to work on X, but build it out more. What are you hoping to gain during this time? Think about what you can take from a fellowship. So very materially, letters of reference, but also if it's a university fellowship, maybe it's that you've co-taught a class, that you gave a presentation, maybe you took a course. I think as hard, and I know when you arrive somewhere, you are just getting oriented and there's so much to do at the same time, but if you can find the time to think ahead of what are the things you hope you've achieved at the end, I think that can be helpful to guide your time in a fellowship. Oh, and there was one last thing that I think Shahinda also mentioned before, which is, on the one hand, I think everyone will give the advice that you have to do your homework on the institution fellowship you're applying for and build a good proposal. But it can also be good to indicate openness to change, so that, as Jane said, it doesn't seem that you are too locked in on one mentor project, whatever it is. But thank you very much, Jane. And of course, Achiro, we would love to hear from you about your fellowship and any advice that you have, perhaps including about how to make the most of a university fellowship.
Sure. The 1st of February will actually mark my 3rd year here in exile. And when I just became a friend of mine called Maggie, she's somewhere among the participants. She introduced me to the Artist Freedom Initiative. And after they took me on board, the activities that they presented me in terms of furthering my education with the different coalitions, and I did that. And then one thing that I remember doing over and over again was really taking advantage of that time that they gave me in terms of they gave me a residency to stay at, and also just the time that I had there was to have a body of work and just keep working, even if I really don't know what was going to happen tomorrow. Now, the end result of this leads me to my today, because after that, because I'd also been in contact with the different organizations and also the different departments within the Artist Freedom Initiative, they recommended me to the Scholars at Risk program because they also knew that it would help me as a person. So during the Scholars at Risk Fellowship right now, where I'm at, I'm at Barnard College, and I get to co-teach in the theatre department. And last year I taught performing women. This year I get to teach what I absolutely love the most. And we're talking about post-colonial drama, where we get to read plays right from the post-colonial time to now. But what I'm trying to say also is I would never have gotten to this opportunity and to this point without taking advantage of the time in waiting. The waiting time can be really daunting. The different applications you've applied for, there are many rejections that will come through. I remember before before Bernard actually offered me a spot, during the waiting period, I literally wrote back to Leona. Leona was who I was working with at the Scholars at Risk program, and told her I'm emotionally broken. And I really felt that within me. And so the waiting period might be long. So it's not automatic that you're going to apply today and you'll be taken in tomorrow. It will take time. That's just a piece of advice that I would have loved to have had it from somebody else in my shoes. So that's something just to keep in mind. Anyway, during this program, the different things that I'm taking advantage of. First of all, like Shahinda said, you might make a plan for what it is you want to get out of this fellowship, but be open to change. Things might change. Now, when I set out my proposal, I was thinking, oh, I want to write a book. I want to do plays. I want to do film, write a film script. And at the time, I didn't even realize how huge these things were in this short period of time. It's only a 10-month fellowship. But at the same time, part of the fellowship requires that I teach classes. So how to balance that is where now I had to rework my proposal to myself in terms of how much output I would like to get out of this fellowship, and also make contacts while at it. And I realized one thing I'm getting used to being in this country is it's important to ask, always approach people, ask your questions, and you will always get the answers that you're looking for, or sometimes not, but at least you will get an answer. So in terms of who is it that you approach, and who is it that I almost latched onto was my co-professor, and she got introduced with different members of the department, and getting to understand how the program works and how their department works, and almost showcasing what I can do to help the different departments kind of keeps you at the back of their minds in case anything else comes up. I also got an opportunity in my proposal. I suggested that I would hold events for my work. I'm a playwright. I'm also a filmmaker and a writer. And I requested that I would love opportunity to showcase my work and to have talkback sessions. And they did provide this. And this also allows you to get in touch with different faculty members that may not have had a position for you at the moment, but when they see your work, and if it aligns with whatever it is they're doing in their different departments, that might be an opportunity for another fellowship that they might be having in their different departments. So that is something I took advantage of. I made friends with the librarian. Everybody says the library is everything. It really is. One, the librarian has her ear on the ground, and she'll always point you out the different resources that would help you make use of the time that you have in that particular university. And then with Barnard, I also found the archives. They have an archival department, and I really immersed myself in that. And it's something that is helping to inform my new works that I am doing right now. It's helping to inform the different projects that I might want to apply for to other residencies or other fellowships. So I guess really just being aware of your surroundings, really just being aware, taking advantage of I don't know if that's what it's called, but basically there's certain information that only people within that particular community in terms of the university will get to know as compared to if you are outside. So taking advantage of all those bulletins when they're sent out and really paying close attention to the different departments you might want to work in and opportunities therein, and see if you fit. I think those are different steps that I'm taking to next level, because this fellowship does end in June. So after that, and starting to plan for it. I don't know who it will. As soon as you get into that fellowship, as much as your mind is focused on this and you really need to pay attention to it, it is not too soon to start thinking about what after, because then your waiting period or your uncertainty period, like I had, and the anxiety that comes with that will be less. So that really has been my experience. I hope it's helpful to the rest of you.
Thank you, Achiro. I think there was a lot of helpful advice for everyone, I imagine, whether you are currently applying for fellowships or, thinking about how to make the most of them right now. I'm glad that you also said it, Achiro. It's never too soon to start thinking about your next steps once you have begun a fellowship. And I think it's right. Xerxes also talked about the resources before that you can take advantage of, whether at a university, that might be the library, career development center. Achiro, you mentioned job postings, bulletins. At a different type of institution that's perhaps more of a think tank, that can be PR department, people who work on social media. And so I think I would encourage you all to take that advice to heart when you think about the institution you're at, and what are things that you can take advantage of, or the gym, maybe. And also, I think the other thing you touched on, Achiro, is networking and finding a mentor who will also introduce you to others. So for anyone who hasn't seen the workshop on academic job search, I think there was a lot of helpful advice there too, to think about how can you find mentors, and how can they also, right, how can you find mentors who can help you on different questions, whether that's someone who can help you with your work, someone who can help you with introducing you to others. We are running a little short on time, so we are now, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise them in the Q&A section so that we can make sure to address them. But the fourth part that I'm very excited about for this session is a conversation between Nazanin, Achiro, and Shahinda. And I think a lot of questions have been raised today. So I think first I'll start us off with a question of, if you haven't mentioned it already, of course, what is something you've achieved? What's a success during your fellowship, and advice that you would draw from that and give to others? Would one of you like to start?
I can start.
I think
sorry.
one thing that I wanted to mention first, and I forgot, was that we all emphasized on the importance of community and, you know, building relationships. But I also think it's important to know that these relationships or connections won't or they shouldn't necessarily translate to immediate outcome. I have found out that a lot of times when you make a connection, it might take a few years before that person or that place offers you another type of opportunity. So I think it's important to have that in mind and think about that, like if you genuinely feel interested in someone's practice, a curator, a gallery, I don't know, a residency place, stay in touch with them. But a lot of things will kind of like come out years later. As an example, I did a really interesting fellowship last year at this place called Dudonné, which is a papermaking studio in Brooklyn. And I was the very first fellow as a printmaker to go learn papermaking and, you know, practice the intersections between the two. It was their pilot program. And then after I was interviewed a number of times, you know, I wrote a proposal, all the things that you have to go through. I realized that I was nominated by one of my fellow former Pratt professors. And I graduated years and years ago. This is what I mean. Like, this is something that, you know, that person, that professor, we had worked together, we did a publication together, we did shows together, and it kind of like became a solid kind of relationship and a friendship. And this is what I mean, that, you know, sometimes things come back and it doesn't have to be short term. But if you invest in it, they will definitely always like come back to you in a way.
Shahinda and Achido, I think we lost you for a moment. Please feel free to go with my question or to share what you think is most relevant. But the question I posed was, what is a success or something you've achieved during your fellowship that you're proud of? And what is advice that you would draw from that to give to others who are seeking to follow in a similar path?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the biggest success from the fellowship for me was the initiative that we planned, which was the result of being, you know, open to change. It was a new idea that we started during the fellowship. And something really, really helpful that happened in relation to the initiative was when I had my final presentation at NED. And this is some advice that I would also like to share with the rest of the participants here. I think really thinking about who you want in the audience, who you're networking with, who you're presenting to is really important. What happened with my project was I managed to complete the design and develop the initiative during the fellowship. And then someone who was present at my presentation reached out to me after I returned from the fellowship. And we are working together now to actually get the startup going and get it registered and start off with the first batch of activities. So that would be the biggest successful outcome of the project for me. And another thing I wanted to add was, while I was at the Reagan Purcell Fellowship and I was working on the initiative and still like taking time to write the book as well, being available to connect with other programs at NED, that really, really helped. I'm waiting for the Center for International Media Assistance. We are working together to get one of my blogs published on their blog. So it's just something that I wasn't even expecting. So just not stay, you know, restricted to your project, just being open and yeah, connect with other programs and staff is really, really useful and helpful. Thank you.
I like that you talked about being open to connect with the different connections within the with the different connections that your program might have with other organizations. I think that for me led to because my program, this one, the fellowship that I'm on is still ongoing, and I'll come to that. But then before this, while I was under the Artist Freedom Initiative, I mean, I'm still under them because they are kind of like my mama, and they're helping with my my paperwork and everything. One thing that they did was introduce me to different organizations that they had within their networks. And one of them, I think for me, was the National Queer Theatre. And we kind of developed a friendship, a relationship, and I started looking at their different programs. Even as with PEN America, I became a part of their network. And the different events that they would actually put out, I became members of that and actually started. And up to today, PEN America still calls me to give talks at different things. NQT produced my play last year, and they're going to produce it again this year. So taking advantage of the different networks or that the organization you're working with at the time or the school actually has with other different organizations. And then with Bernard right now, during the time when I had the opportunity to have an event last semester, I'll have another one this semester. I showcased my play, the same play that was shown at during the National Queer Theatre Festival. And a couple of members of the audience who were different faculty members now keep on getting in touch and asking if they can use the play to teach, and they actually invite me as a guest speaker to speak about my different experiences on making this play, how I wrote it back in Uganda and things like that. I think it's really just paying attention to the network around you and taking advantage of each and every one. There's nothing that's too big or too small, and you never know who is watching. And also just reaching out. One thing that has really helped me is Google. Google has actually been my friend. Where I did not know who to look at and what to look at, I'd literally just Google and say, who a list of fellowships right now, a list of academic fellowships right now. That was even way before I got into a network of knowing where to go, knowing how to do things. And then just apply. And sometimes I got in, sometimes I got a referral, sometimes I got rejections, many times I got rejections. But just being aware of your surroundings and taking advantage of everything around you, even beginning with the small that you have, and then also just continuing to work. Keep on working, whatever it is, as an artist or as a human rights defender. Do your proposals. Keep on, like, even if you do not have a clear sight of where it is that you're going. Maybe no one has responded to any of your previous applications, or even that you're still waiting for your paperwork to come through. It doesn't have to keep on working and to keep your body of work, because when that door opens, it opens really fast and they open rapidly. And it would be such a shame when a door opens and you have nothing to present to them, and it would literally just be like someone presenting you water and it's just flowing through your hands. So just having that cup full for whatever it is that comes your way, just keep working at it. One day when the door opens, just have something to present, something to showcase you, something to sell you. I think for me that's the most important thing as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention one little thing or add to Chiro. Sometimes I feel like, I think what the three of us do share in common is that people who live in exile like us or are immigrants to new societies, it feels like when you, land in this new world, no one knows you. You're an absolute nobody. You have like no friends, no connections necessarily. You might have very, very limited resources. And this is how I think about this, that it's like building it step by step. So it takes a while. And there are, of course, a lot of, obstacles and difficulties, rejections, trying to build the community and a network. It takes a while, but it's like I always, whenever I get like frustrated, I remind myself that, you know what, comparing to a lot of other people, I'm still a newcomer. And I'm really building my community from scratch. And I think that's important to remember, that it takes a while. But now you're like in control of your own story and you're making it kind of.
Thank you all three, Naz, Shahinda, and Arturo. And I think one thing, well, that you actually already summarized just now, Naz, that all three of you, I think, highlighted is how things build, right? And in the moment, if you meet someone, they might not be able to offer you a job or an opportunity, but you're creating a network so that in the future, opportunities can arise, or you're continuing your work so that in the future, when something, right, when there is the perfect opportunity for this project, you're ready. And of course, we do know that in the moment that you are looking for opportunities, right, your gaze might be more in the present. But I hope that also hearing from the three, so Shahinda, Naz, and Achiro, is also encouraging, knowing that probably all three at some point were worried about their next steps. We do have one question in the chat. It's from Sayed, who is working with colleagues from Iran and Afghanistan on establishing an organization of exiled researchers, and is asking if anyone is aware of resources, well, I guess especially funding resources, or has any advice for him and his colleagues as they are trying to continue their work. Sayed, I will think more about this question. So I will send you my email so we can think about resources, but I wanted to see if anyone has any advice, including you, Shahinda, given your organization.
I could jump in and say that I would be happy to connect with him and others who have a similar interest and background in human rights work to offer some connections, introductions, guidance, resources for anyone along those lines. So I'll include my email in the chat for folks who would like to email me.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for my project to kickstart, which is why I've actually kept silent on this question. But we hope to offer some programs and activities for people who are outside of their country and trying to continue their work. What I can do is share the information with you as soon as we do get registered, and as soon as the programs do get started. I will be happy to share that information so that if everyone can share it widely, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Shahinda, and thank you very much, everyone. And all the best for your search for fellowships.